The glass conference room smelled of fresh paint and unearned confidence. It was a transparent box designed to make everyone inside feel exposed. At the head of the table sat Oliver Croft. Oliver was 25 years old. He wore a Patagonia fleece vest over a designer t-shirt that cost more than my first car, and his teeth looked like they had been whitened by a solar flare. He had been our chief technology officer for 3 weeks, and his primary contribution had been replacing the break room coffee with cold brew and referring to our mainframe system, which processed $2 billion a day, as tech debt. "Julian," Oliver said, spinning a metal pen, "we need to talk about velocity. We need to talk about cloud-native microservices. We need to talk about removing the legacy anchors that are holding this bank back." He meant me. I was the anchor. I sat with my hands folded on the table. I am 58 years old. I have been with this financial institution since, before Oliver was a thought in his father's mind. I wrote the assembly code that handled the overnight settlements back in 1989. I survived the dot-com bust, the 2008 liquidity crisis, and 3 separate administrations that believed blockchain was the answer to a question nobody asked. I do not smoke, but sitting across from Oliver, I felt the phantom itch of a nicotine craving. "Go on, Oliver," I said. My voice was quiet, the exact tone I used when a server rack overheats. "Tell me about the anchors." "Look, Julian," he said, flashing a performative smile. "You are a legend. The work you did on the old transaction system is historical. But we are pivoting. We are going cloud native, using Kubernetes and moving away from basement hardware. Frankly, your current salary band is heavy. We can hire 3 junior developers for what you cost us." He smiled again and slid a thick white envelope across the table. "We have put together a transition package," Oliver continued. "It is very generous. Early retirement, a consultant title on the website. You get to walk away as a pioneer." I looked at the envelope but did not touch it. I knew it contained a modest lump sum and a non-disclosure agreement that would legally bind my hands for 5 years. "Oliver," I said, ignoring the document, "do you have any idea what actually runs on the main server in the basement?" "Old code," he scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Spaghetti logic. That is why we are scrapping it. It is not just code, Oliver. It is the clearinghouse interface. It is the wire verification system that connects us to the Federal Reserve. It is the biometric security kernel that enforces compliance for high-value transfers. You know, the federal banking laws that keep the regulators from locking our doors and turning this skyscraper into a vacant lot." He laughed. "We have outside advisors for that. A team of consultants is arriving on Monday. They will scrape the logic, refactor the application into modern scripts, and we will be live on the cloud by the end of the next quarter." The sheer hubris was a work of art. He honestly believed a squad of 22-year-old graduates who learned programming from online videos could untangle 30 years of transaction processing logic in a single weekend. "So, this is effective immediately?" I asked. "Effective immediately," Oliver nodded. "We need your security badge and your laptop. Security will escort you out. It is standard protocol, nothing personal." I stood up slowly, my joints popping. I did not touch the envelope. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my security badge, and placed it on the table. Then I retrieved my hardware token fob, the one that generated the changing security pins, and set it next to the badge. "Is that everything?" Oliver asked. Looking at my briefcase, "That is everything the bank owns," I replied. I did not mention the other thing. It was not in my briefcase. It was recorded in the ridges of my right thumb and the unique pattern of my left iris, a dual biometric key stored deep inside the read-only sector of the mainframe security layer. I had hard-coded that verification requirement 10 years ago, after a foreign hacking collective attempted to brute force our credentials. It was a lock that required my physical presence to authorize any alterations to the primary settlement logical path. Oliver did not know about it because he had never read the system documentation. "Good luck, Oliver," I said. "You are going to need it." "We make our own luck, Julian," he grinned. "Disrupt or die, right?" "Something like that," I said. I turned and walked out. I walked past the open floor plan where the junior developers sat in beanbag chairs, writing code that would fail the moment it touched a live database. I rode the elevator down to the lobby. The security guard, Silas Cooper, looked shocked to see me carrying a cardboard box. "Everything all right, Mr. Vance?" Silas asked, stepping out from behind his desk. Just upgrading my operating system. Silas, I said, offering a warm smile. I walked out into the cool morning air, got into my old sedan, and adjusted the mirror. I put the car in gear and drove home to my quiet house. I was going to water my flowers, and then I was going to wait, because I knew exactly how long it takes for a machine to realize its heart has been removed. About 48 hours. Monday morning was going to be very interesting. My garden is a lot like a mainframe system if you study it closely. It requires rigid structure, constant maintenance, and the absolute elimination of parasitic bugs. On Saturday morning, I was knee-deep in organic soil, carefully pruning the dead heads off my prized hydrangeas. The ground was cool and wet under my heavy gardening gloves. For the first time in 20 years, I did not spend my Saturday morning checking database transaction logs over a cup of black coffee. Normally, my weekend was punctuated by the constant vibration of my mobile phone, sending system alerts, warning codes, and performance metrics. Today, the phone sat on the wooden patio table, completely silent. It was a strange silence, the kind that felt heavy, like the air right before a severe thunderstorm hits the valley. I made a cup of hot tea and sat on my porch, watching a squirrel try to bypass the barriers on my bird feeder. I named the squirrel Oliver. He was persistent, noisy, and completely doomed to fail because I had engineered that feeder with the exact same defensive paranoia I applied to the bank's internal firewalls. Around noon, the first communication came through. It was a text message from Nolan Finch. Nolan was a 24-year-old database engineer I had hired 2 years ago. He was a bright kid, one of the few who actually understood database memory allocation, which put him in the top 1% of our recent hires. "Julian, are you really gone?" Nolan wrote. "The outside consultants have arrived. They are already changing the server configurations." I took a slow sip of my tea and did not reply. I could visualize the scene in the office perfectly. The main conference room would be filled with massive whiteboards, covered in useless flowcharts, arrows, and buzzwords like synergy and legacy decoupling, written in bright red markers. The consultants would be talking about modernizing the database and removing the old transaction logic. They did not understand that the old system was not just a pile of legacy code. It was a load-bearing wall holding up the entire bank. By Sunday evening, the modernization had accelerated. My phone buzzed again, another message from Nolan. "They are bypassing the staging environment entirely, Julian. Oliver says we must show immediate progress to the board. The consultants have root access to the active development partition. They are running migration scripts on the live database." I felt a cold sensation in my chest. Giving outside contractors root access to an active development partition, without testing the scripts in a staging sandbox, was the technical equivalent of performing open-heart surgery with a rusty saw while riding a bicycle. I closed my eyes and visualized the system architecture. It was a beautiful, highly complex web of logical dependencies. If you altered the customer identity files, the changes rippled through to the active loan processing logic. If you updated the loan records, it sent a verification signal to the general ledger. And if the general ledger did not receive a matching confirmation within 50 milliseconds, it automatically triggered the system fraud lock. The fraud lock was the ultimate barrier. It was not just a simple flag in the code, it was a biological gate. 10 years ago, after a massive security threat, the board of directors had panicked. They demanded absolute accountability. They wanted a single individual to oversee high-value transactions, so that if something went wrong, they had a throat to choke. I had given them mine. I built a dual biometric verification module into the core update system of the settlement processor. To push any configuration changes to the logic that moved money outside the bank, the operator needed 2 keys. First, a cryptographic administrator token, which the consultants now possessed. Second, a live biometric scan of the senior mainframe architect, which was currently sitting on a porch in New Jersey. The consultants had not hit that wall yet. They were still playing in the shallow waters, modifying the customer interface, changing the website layouts, and moving buttons around. They thought they were successful developers. They did not realize they were rowing a small boat directly toward a massive waterfall. I went inside my kitchen and began cooking a slow dinner. Stirring rice is a meditative process. It requires undivided attention and constant, steady movement, much like managing a batch run. You cannot rush it. If you turn the heat up too high, you burn the bottom. If you stop stirring, the mixture clumps together. Oliver Croft was the kind of chef who would turn the stove to maximum heat, throw the ingredients in, and walk away to check his social media profiles. Monday morning arrived with the cold inevitability of a system crash. I woke up at 6, showered, dressed in my casual retired clothes, and sat down at my personal computer. I did not log into the bank's private virtual network. Doing so would violate computer access laws, and I was far too smart for that. Instead, I opened the public status page that displayed system availability for our retail customers. All systems operational. The green text read. Lies, I murmured to myself. I knew what was happening behind the glass walls of the high rise. The consultants were probably high-fiving each other in the halls. They had successfully updated the user login page and pushed it live. Look at how fast we are working, they would say. We changed the submit button to a modern shade of blue. But deep down in the climate-controlled server vault, where the air was kept at a freezing 64 degrees, the mainframe was watching. It was receiving new, unfamiliar commands from unverified sources. It was checking its security directories, looking for a biometric signature that did not exist. It was waiting, and so was I. The first technical cracks appeared on Tuesday morning. It was not a total collapse. Legacy systems do not usually explode in a single moment. They die by 1,000 tiny cuts, slowly bleeding out until the entire structure collapses. It started with the system logs. In commercial banking, if a transaction is not properly logged, it never occurred. And if a transaction occurs but there is no corresponding log record, that is not a software bug. It is a federal felony. I was at the local market, choosing between organic and imported produce, when my phone rang. It was not a text message this time. It was a direct call from Nolan. I let it ring 3 times. The deeply ingrained instinct to troubleshoot, to run to the office, and to save the system was part of my identity. But I looked at the fresh vegetables, firm and silent, and took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Nolan," I said. "Julian, thank God you answered," Nolan whispered. His voice was a full octave higher than normal, and he sounded like he was hyperventilating inside a narrow server cabinet. "Calm down, Nolan," I said. "Take a slow breath. Tell me what is happening." "The transaction sequence IDs," he gasped. "They are skipping numbers. We ran the morning transaction batch, and the sequence numbers are jumping by tens of thousands. The compliance database is flashing red alerts, but Oliver ordered us to ignore the warnings." "Ignore the warnings," I repeated. "Yes. He told us to mute the alerts. He said it is just legacy noise from the old system. He called the system logs boomer spaghetti in the morning meeting, and said the new database handles indexing differently." I gripped the basket in my hand, my knuckles turning white. Oliver Croft was telling his team to silence the fire alarms while the building was filling with smoke. "Listen to me carefully, Nolan," I said, leaning against the display shelf. "Do not ignore those warnings. Print out the system logs. Send copies to your private email address. Document every single instruction Oliver gives you. Protect yourself." "But how do I fix the index jumps?" Nolan asked. "The consultants are trying to run a manual reindex on the live database." "They are doing what?" I said, almost dropping my phone. "Running a manual reindex on a live, active transactional database during business hours is absolute suicide. It locks the main tables, no application can read from them, and no application can write to them. The entire bank will freeze." "Oliver approved it," Nolan said. "He told them to move fast and break things." "Well," I said, a cold calm settling over my mind, "he is certainly going to succeed at breaking things." "Nolan, do not touch it. Do not type a single command. If you touch that database while it is reindexing, you will corrupt the pointers and turn $2 billion of customer data into digital dust." "But the system is stalling, Julian. The branch managers are reporting massive latency." "Let it stall," I said. "Go get some lunch, Nolan. Take a very long lunch. Julian, please, do you know the table override password?" "I know you wrote it." I did know it. It was a hexadecimal string I had memorized 20 years ago. Entering it would immediately release the table locks, abort the reindex, and restore stability to the transaction queue. "I cannot help you, Nolan," I said quietly. "I am retired. I am just a legacy anchor. You do not want an anchor dragging down your modern speed. I hung up the phone. I stood in the aisle, looking at the fruit. My heart was pounding. It went against every principle of my career to let a system fail. I had spent my life keeping the bank online. I had missed family dinners, holidays, and vacations to keep the data moving. But if I intervened now, Oliver would take all the credit. He would claim his modern methods solved the issue, and next month, he would do something even more dangerous. I put my groceries in the basket and walked to the register. By Wednesday afternoon, the small fires had merged into a massive blaze. Customers were posting screenshots on social media. Why does my balance say $0? Why can I not transfer my mortgage payment? Fix your system. I sat on my sofa, sipping a glass of wine and scrolling through the complaints. The bank's official account was posting automated replies. We are experiencing minor technical difficulties during our system upgrade. Thank you for your patience. Then the internal logs leaked. Someone, likely Nolan, had posted a screenshot of the server CPU usage on an anonymous technology forum. The processing core was pinned at 99%. The consultants had written a loop that queried the entire historical database every time a user attempted to check their balance. It was a massive denial of service attack, and it was originating from inside the bank's own firewall. I watched the bank's public stock price drop by 50 cents. Burn, I whispered, but the main event had not even started. Thursday was the end of the fiscal quarter. It was settlement day, the day the bank had to reconcile its books with the Federal Reserve and move billions of dollars in interbank transfers. If the system was not perfect on Thursday, the federal penalties would begin in the millions of dollars. I checked my calendar. I had a long massage appointment scheduled for 10 in the morning. The timing was absolutely perfect. Thursday morning arrived with a clear blue sky, but inside the headquarters of Bank East Coast, it was the dawn of a financial disaster. Quarterly settlement is not a project sprint. It is a hard, legally mandated deadline. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, billions of dollars in commercial wire transfers, international settlements, and interbank transactions must be reconciled and transmitted to the Federal Reserve System. If the ledger is not balanced, the regulatory fines begin instantly, followed by federal audits and potential closure. I was sitting in a quiet spa, wrapped in a comfortable white robe and drinking water. My phone was locked in a cabinet, switched off. At the bank, I knew exactly what was happening. At 8, the settlement batch jobs would start. The mainframe would attempt to aggregate 90 days of transactions. But because the consultants had changed the database character encoding from the mainframe's native format to standard UTF-8, without updating the translation index, the mainframe was choking. By 10, the system verification hashes were failing. The settlement window opened, but the system was locked in an infinite verification loop. At 11, Oliver Croft would be sweating through his designer clothes in the network control room. He would be screaming at the outside contractors to bypass the system check. And that is when they would attempt the ultimate workaround, the emergency override command. I had written that command myself. It was designed for emergencies, allowing an authorized administrator to declare that they had manually verified the data and to force the transmission to proceed. But for a $2 billion settlement, the system required the highest level of administrative credentials. Only one account held those privileges. Mine. At 12:30, I turned my phone back on. It immediately began vibrating continuously. I had 47 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and dozens of messages. Most of them were from Oliver, his messages growing increasingly frantic. Julian, answer me. We have an emergency. We need your override credentials. Then came a text from Nolan. Oliver tried to bypass your lock. He used an artificial voice generator to spoof your security profile and signed your name to an emergency override form. The system detected the fake scan. It triggered the security lock. We are in fortress mode. The system is counting down. I smiled. A cold, thin expression. The security protocol had functioned perfectly. When someone tried to force an administrative bypass using spoofed biometrics, the mainframe did not simply deny access. It assumed a hostile cyber attack. It entered fortress mode, locking the entire directory structure, disconnecting all external transaction gateways, and starting a 4-hour countdown. If a physical Verified biometric scan from the senior mainframe architect was not received before the timer reached 0. The system would assume the physical building had been compromised by a hostile actor. It would automatically delete all active encryption keys. The database would remain, but it would become completely unreadable. Restoring the system from offline tape backups, kept in a mountain vault, would take 3 full days. The bank would be insolvent before the tapes even arrived. My phone rang again. This time, the screen showed the name of Preston Thorne, the 70-year-old chairman of the board. Preston was old money, a conservative executive who did not understand microservices, but understood the threat of regulatory seizure. I answered on the third ring. "Hello, Preston," I said. "Julian, where are you?" Preston's voice was trembling, not with anger, but with absolute panic. "We have a critical issue. The system is asking for your physical thumbprint and retina scan. Oliver says we cannot move the settlement files without you." "Ah, yes," I replied, checking my watch. "That is the security protocol I installed 10 years ago. It is documented on page 4002 of the Disaster Recovery Manual. You signed the authorization yourself, Preston. We have less than 2 hours before the Federal Reserve window closes, Julian. If we do not process the settlements, the regulators will seize the bank by tomorrow morning. We are facing complete collapse." "That sounds like a massive problem, Preston," I said, "but as you know, I am retired." Oliver was very clear that my services were no longer required. "Name your price, Julian," Preston snapped. "We will send a car. Just get here." "I do not like being rushed, Preston, and I do not work for you anymore. If I am to return, it will not be as a simple employee." "What do you want?" Preston gasped. "I want a formal meeting in the boardroom," I said. "I want the entire board of directors present, and I want Oliver Croft there." "I will arrive in 1 hour." "We will be waiting," Preston said. I hung up, walked to my car, and drove toward the city. I did not speed. I listened to a radio broadcast about gardening. The bank was facing a fatal crisis, and I had the only key. But I was not going to give it away for nothing. The drive to the corporate headquarters took 45 minutes. When I pulled into the visitor parking deck, I could see the panic in the lobby. Silas Cooper, the security guard, fumbled as he printed a visitor pass. "Mr. Vance, thank God," Silas said, handing me the badge. "The executives are waiting." "Thank you, Silas," I said, sticking the guest pass onto my sweater. I rode the elevator to the boardroom. Inside, the mahogany table was covered in empty bottles and monitors displaying red errors. The entire board of directors sat in stunned silence. Oliver Croft stood by the window, his fleece vest unzipped, his face pale. "Julian," Preston Thorne said, rising immediately. "Thank you for coming." I did not sit down. I stood at the end of the table, holding my briefcase. "I understand you have a technical issue," I said. "It is the biometric lock," Oliver whispered. "We tried to bypass it, but the system is frozen." "You cannot bypass a kernel lock while the system is in fortress mode, Oliver," I said, speaking to him like a schoolteacher explaining arithmetic. "It locks the write heads." "Did you not read the README text file in the system root?" Oliver looked down at the table, silent. I turned to Preston. "You have exactly 90 minutes before the Federal Reserve window closes. If I do not verify my biometrics, the encryption keys will be deleted. The bank will go dark, and the regulators will lock the doors on Monday morning." "We know," Preston said. "Please, tell us what you require." "I can fix it in 30 seconds, I said. "I will scan my thumb and my iris, the system will recognize my signature, and the queue will clear. But I cannot do that as an unverified civilian. We must sign a contract before I touch the terminal." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a neat, stapled document. I slid it down the table to Preston. "This is an independent consultancy agreement," I said. "Consultancy?" Preston squinted at the pages. "The hourly rate is $500, with a guaranteed minimum of 40 hours per week, plus a quarterly retention bonus for biometric availability." "Check the math, Preston," I said. "It is a tiny fraction of the billions you will lose if the settlement fails." "And what is this clause for?" a board member asked. Clause 4 states that the senior consultant reports directly to the board. Furthermore, the chief technology officer will report to the consultant on all matters regarding core system infrastructure. Oliver's eyes went wide. "You want me to report to you?" "No, Oliver," I said. "I do not want to talk to you at all. Clause 4 means you do not touch the mainframe. You can play with your web applications, but the critical systems are off limits. Preston looked at the clock, then at Oliver, then at the contract. He signed the document and slid it back. Is this arrangement lawful? Preston asked the company lawyer. It is enforceable, sir, the lawyer whispered. Especially Clause 7. What is Clause 7? Oliver asked. Clause 7 states that any attempt to bypass, replicate, or coerce the consultant's biometric credentials constitutes a material breach, resulting in an immediate contract termination fee of $5 million. Oliver Croft committed a felony under California Penal Code, Section 470, when he attempted to spoof My Biometrics, I said, looking at Preston. That makes his bypass attempt void ab initio. Any transaction processed under it is illegal. You are facing personal liability for breach of fiduciary duty if you allow this to continue. The room went completely silent. Preston Thorne signed the contract. I folded it and placed it in my briefcase. Give me your laptop, Oliver, I said. Oliver handed it over. I opened the terminal, entered the mainframe gateway, and looked at the green screen authorization required. Senior Architect Biometrics. I pressed my thumb against the scanner on the podium. The scanner blinked green ident, verified, Julian Vance. Access granted, fortress mode disengaged, resuming batch processing. A loud collective sigh of relief filled the room. The red indicators on the wall monitors turned green. The queue is clearing, I said. You will hit the Federal Reserve window with 8 minutes to spare. Oh, and Oliver, clean your keyboard. 3 months later, Bank East Coast was quiet again. Quiet means the assets are secure. I only come into the high rise on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The rest of the time, I monitor the server logs from my garden using an encrypted tablet. Oliver Croft was reassigned to the Digital Aesthetics Department. He is now in charge of selecting fonts for the retail mobile application. He is no longer allowed near the server room. On my final day of restabilizing the core, I placed a black leather binder on the boardroom table. It was the new system manual. On the final page, I had updated the security logic. The system now requires 2 biometric scans to authorize a Level 5 configuration change, mine, and the scan of the newly promoted junior architect. Nolan Finch. If the board ever decides to replace me again, they will have to replace Nolan too, and Nolan is entirely loyal to the man who saved his career. I walked out of the building into the cool autumn air. I got into my sedan and checked my account. The first consulting payment had cleared. The number of dollars was comically large. "Cyst secure," I murmured, putting the car in gear. I had hydrangeas to prune, and for the first time in 30 years I was not worried about my phone ringing.